just fell into this, you know. It's something that I wasn't expecting at all, and I had been building guitars for 3 years on the East Coast as an apprentice with this guy. We were building classical and steel string acoustics, and we had a major falling out after 3 years, and I moved to California, and my drummer friend was going to school in San Francisco, so I stayed at his place while I went around town looking for work because I ran out of money. And I was given plasma twice a week for $7 a shot so I could have groceries, and, you know, walking everywhere because I couldn't afford 25 cents to get on the bus to go around town. But I got this job at a place called Chickens That Sing on Haight and Ashbury Street in 1975, and I thought, I'm finally here. You know, I always wanted to be in San Francisco where the scene, the psychedelic scene, was happening. And, you know, it had petered out some by that point, but there was still a lot going on. But at the end of the first week of being there, I finally I got a call at my buddy's number. He said, hey, this place up north they're called the Limbic. Have you heard of them? And I went, oh yeah. I said, they don't have a shop in San Francisco. They just had a storefront. And he goes, well, they want to talk to you. And so I called them up, and they said, yeah, we want to interview you. Come on up to Katati. And I said, where's that? And they told me where it was. I hitchhiked up and had the interview. And they said, we got a guy who's leaving because he's got asthma. And this whole area is just chock full of pollen every year. So he had to move up to Washington in order to get better. And they just said, well, come back Monday morning, and you are now working for Alembic Guitars. And started out at number 200, and I left there at number 1400, and it was probably the most fun, exciting, interesting, and rewarding job I had ever had. You know, the first week I was there, I looked over my shoulder and David Crosby was walking by, and the next day I looked over my shoulder and Carlos Santana was walking by. We were building stuff for Fleetwood Mac and Led Zeppelin and all these other big bands, you know, that were just at the top of the charts at that point. I was just like, tried to tell my parents, and they were like, oh, we're glad you got a job, honey. You know, it's like, yeah. you don't get it.
Yeah.
You do not get it. But, you know, the first week that I was there, I drilled right through two $2,000 basses. And I thought, well, there goes that job. And I told my boss, Rick Turner, and I said, hey, I just had a couple accidents. And he goes, what happened? And I told him I was drilling for the pickup holes for the screws that raise and lower the pickups.
Yeah. And
I didn't have a stop on my bit. I just zipped right through, not thinking. And so there's a hole in the back of each of these instruments. You know, Alembics were $2,000 in. They're about $35,000 for the same model now.
Wow.
And you could buy a Fender P-Bass for $150 back then. So it was a hefty ticket to get one of those things. And he said, well, just put an inlay over it, cover it up. And so one of them, I had a little hummingbird. I think I still have the drawing for that. It was a pretty crappy drawing because I didn't know what I was doing. He gave me a saw and some blades and a little bit of shell, and he said, go put an inlay over it. And that was my first experience of doing inlay work.
Yeah.
And when I finished, he looked at it and he went, oh, now we can call it custom and charge more for it. And this little light bulb went off in my head, and I started inlaying everything I could get my hands on.
Yeah.
You know, wall ornaments, boxes, plaques, you know. I've done drums, I've done funeral urns, I've done all kinds of stuff over the years, but most in guns, you know, mostly though it's been musical instruments. And that was in 1975 when that happened, and then by 1984 I was so sick of working for other people. At that point I had a job at Modulus Graphite, where I worked for 3 or 4 years down in San Francisco, or building graphite necked instruments. Once again, big name people, you know, it was an interesting new concept, these graphite necks, and I wasn't doing any inlay work down there, but I was still doing it at home, and I just got so tired of the commute. I just went, I got to work for myself. So I quit that job, and I was living in Bloomfield at the time, which was way out in the boonies, and had a nice house for $300 a month, 2-bedroom, two-bedroom house and a 2-car garage on 60 acres.
Wow.
$300 a month. and my girlfriend was working as a nurse, so we barely squeaked by that first year. I think I made $6,000 that entire year doing inlay work. But gradually, it just kind of took off, and I don't worry when I'm close to the end of the month now and things aren't happening, because it's not like I'm selling groceries. People don't have to have what I'm doing. But fortunately for me, I have a little name recognition, and now a lot of people are doing it on CNC, and they, God bless them, they can. It's not the same market. I had one of my friends tell me, Larry Seifel, who started ProWorks, which does all of Paul Reed Smith's Dragons and all of C.F. Martin's, special series of things. He says, let's say you do a $3,000 vine on a neck. He says, if I make one on CNC, it's going to cost the customer $30,000. He said, but if I make 100 of them, each one will be less than $3,000. I said, well, that's good to know, because we're not competing with each other. People come to me because they want something that's made by a human being.
Yeah.
And everything doesn't fit as tightly as it does with the CNC, but there's something sterile about the CNC work that you just, with the hand work, there might be a little bit of, I try to get it as close as possible, but there's always a little bit of space here and there. And it's more like when you're drawing a cartoon, you just don't draw it with a single thin line. There's line weight that maneuvers itself around to give it some credence and presence. So I just think, well, thank God for that, because I can't make it look like CNC exactly. And I don't really want to. I want it to have the human touch.
Yeah.
So that's my story in a nutshell.